I never thought this would be how I'd find myself, standing in my own kitchen, phone in hand, trying to process words I could barely comprehend. It was a Thursday morning, and the air in the house felt warm, almost cozy, as I prepared breakfast for my kids. Emma, with her bright smile, and Lucas, who had that adorable little laugh that made everything better. The scent of pancakes and maple syrup filled the room, and I felt that familiar holiday anticipation. Thanksgiving was just around the corner. The thought of family, laughter, and the cozy traditions that came with the season always made me feel nostalgic and hopeful. I should have been thinking about the turkey, or how many pies we needed this year. I should have been planning what time to arrive at my mom's house, trying to figure out how to keep the kids entertained for the day. I should have been thinking about my mom's famous stuffing, the one I always looked forward to, and the way my dad would act like he was too full for dessert but always had room for one more slice of pumpkin pie. But instead, I stood there, staring at my phone, feeling the room grow colder, the warmth fading as my mother's voice, unusually light, echoed through the receiver. "Honey, we need to talk about Thanksgiving this year." The words sent a shiver down my spine. A simple sentence, really, but the way she said it, so casual, so nonchalant, struck a chord deep in me. I stopped stirring the batter for a moment, the spoon still in my hand as I felt a tightening in my chest. Thanksgiving. Of course. I knew it was coming up. We always celebrated together, right? It was tradition, family thing. No matter how much distance had grown between us over the years, Thanksgiving had always remained constant. At least that's what I thought. "Sure, Mom. What's the plan?" I replied, forcing a lightness into my voice, though the knot in my stomach was already beginning to tighten. The moment the words left my mouth, I realized how naive I was to think that the upcoming holiday would be just like every other. A long pause followed, a stretch of silence that was long enough to make my heart beat faster, unsure of what was coming next. "Well," my mom finally continued, clearing her throat, "this year, we're doing things a little differently." A small flicker of concern sparked within me, but I ignored it. It was probably just something small, a new recipe she wanted to try, or maybe she wanted to keep it more low-key. I could get on board with that. It's not like we had to go all out every year, right? "It's going to be a smaller dinner," she added. "Just adults. Something more intimate." And that was when I felt the air in the room shift. It wasn't a major change in what she was saying, but the way she said it. Something didn't feel right. The knot in my stomach grew tighter. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper now. "So no kids." Another pause, longer this time. It wasn't just the silence that bothered me. It was the way she was avoiding answering directly. "Well, no. Not exactly." I could feel my heartbeat now. It was rapid, unsteady, like a drumbeat that wouldn't slow down. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tight. She sighed, and I could almost picture her rolling her eyes on the other end of the line. The sigh wasn't for me, it was for her own discomfort. I knew that tone all too well. "Ally," she said, her voice wavering slightly now. "We love your kids. We really do. But, they're a bit energetic. And honestly, we just feel like it would be better if you left them with a sitter this year." A cold wave rushed over me. The heat that had been building from the stove, the warmth of the kitchen, seemed to drain away in an instant. I set the spoon down on the counter, unable to focus on anything but her words. "So just my kids?" I asked, my voice growing more distant. "Yes," she answered quickly, her tone now more matter-of-fact. "But Daniel's kids." And that was when I knew. I knew what was coming next. "Daniel and Sophie are coming with their boys," my mom continued, her voice softening as if trying to make it sound like it wasn't a big deal. "But you know how well-behaved they are, Ally. They're just quieter, more refined. It's easier to have them at the table." The words felt like a slap in the face. I could feel the blood rush to my cheeks, a flush of heat spreading through my body, but it wasn't warmth. It was anger, humiliation, betrayal. "Emma is 7, and Lucas is 4. I managed to say, my voice shaking now. "Of course, they have energy. But they're sweet, Mom. They love you. Why are you doing this?" There was another sigh, this one more exasperated than the last. "We're just trying to have a peaceful evening, ally." Her words cut deeper than I expected. Peaceful. The word sounded so simple, but in that moment, it felt like 1,000 tiny daggers stabbing into my heart. It wasn't personal, she had said, but it felt deeply personal. I gripped the edge of the counter so tightly that my knuckles turned white, the cool surface beneath my hands offering no comfort. I had never imagined I would ever hear these words, let alone from my own mother. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving. This was about something much deeper, something I'd been ignoring for years. The way they had always treated my children like an afterthought. The way Daniel's boys were always the ones getting the attention, the special presents, the praise, the photos on the family wall. And now it was so obvious, so blatant. I felt the familiar surge of emotion rising up in me. The hurt, the anger, the frustration. But I swallowed it down. "You're actually telling me that my kids aren't welcome, but Daniel's are?" I whispered, the disbelief in my voice echoing the disbelief in my chest. "Oh, ally," my mom said, her voice suddenly sharp. "Don't be dramatic. It's just one dinner. You and Liam are still invited, of course." I almost laughed, but the sound that came out of me was more like a bitter cough. They wanted me there, but they didn't want my children. The two little people I loved more than anything. The two people who adored their grandparents, who couldn't wait to see them, to play with them, to laugh with them. "No, Mom," I said, my voice steady now, though inside, everything was crumbling. "If my kids aren't welcome, then neither am I." There was silence on the other end of the line, a heavy, suffocating silence. Then, after what felt like an eternity, I heard my mother exhale sharply. "Suit yourself," she said, and with that, the call ended. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, unable to comprehend what had just happened. I hung up the phone, but the silence that followed felt anything but peaceful. I stood there, in the middle of my kitchen, the smell of pancakes now almost nauseating. The warmth that had once filled the room now felt like a distant memory. My thoughts were scattered, like leaves in the wind, too overwhelmed to settle on any one thing. I glanced over at Emma and Lucas, their laughter from the living room a sharp contrast to the tension in my chest. They had no idea what was happening, no idea that their grandparents, the people who had once been their world, had just excluded them from the very thing that was supposed to bring us together. I felt my hands tremble as I reached for my phone again, my mind racing. Should I call her back? Should I try to explain? The question swirled, but nothing felt right. How could I even begin to make sense of what she'd said? No kids at Thanksgiving. It wasn't just the exclusion of my children that stung. It was the way she spoke about them. Energetic, she'd said, as if that was all they were. As if their boundless energy, their joy, and their love for her weren't enough to warrant a seat at the table. My children, I thought again, a wave of protectiveness rising inside me. No, this wasn't just about a dinner. This was about respect, about love, and about everything that had been brewing beneath the surface for years. The truth, however painful it was to admit, was that this had been coming for a long time. I had spent years excusing my parents' behavior, telling myself that they didn't mean it, that they loved us equally. But the cracks had started to show long before this Thanksgiving conversation. Every Christmas, every birthday, I watched as Daniel's children received more attention, more gifts, more affection, while Emma and Lucas were left to make do with whatever was left over. I had always told myself it didn't matter. They loved my kids, even if it didn't feel like it sometimes. But now it was undeniable. This wasn't a small oversight. This was deliberate. I stood there, frozen, as a cold realization crept in. This year, Thanksgiving was supposed to be a celebration, a family gathering, a time to be thankful for the blessings we had. But instead, it had become a dividing line. The more I thought about it, the more I understood. This wasn't just about dinner. This was a decision that would affect everything. The way they treated my children, the way they had always treated them, had reached its breaking point. I looked back at the living room where Emma and Lucas were, happily building a fort out of pillows, unaware of the storm that had just erupted in our world. How could I let them grow up believing that this was normal? That it was okay for their grandparents to treat them like an afterthought? It wasn't just a matter of one dinner. It was a matter of what message this would send to them. I wasn't willing to let that happen. Before I share what happened next, the moment that changed everything for me, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to steady my racing thoughts. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let my children believe they weren't good enough. I wasn't going to let this toxic dynamic continue, not if I had a say in it. This was bigger than Thanksgiving dinner. This was about standing up for what was right for my family. My real family. I walked into the living room and sat down with Emma and Lucas. They looked up at me, smiling brightly. Their innocence, their unconditional love, made everything that much harder. How could I explain to them that their grandparents, the ones they adored, had decided that they weren't worthy of the family table? I forced a smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. "All right, you two," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Who's ready for movie night?" Lucas jumped up, his little eyes wide with excitement. "Can we watch the one with the talking dog?" I chuckled softly and scooped him up, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Of course we can, buddy," I said, kissing his soft curls. But even as I sat down with them, the anger inside me refused to settle. I had spent years trying to make peace with my parents, hoping that if I just did everything right, if I played by their rules, maybe, just maybe, they'd see me as more than just the second child, the one who was always in Daniel's shadow. But it had never been enough. And now it was time for me to stop pretending. No more excuses. No more trying to win their approval. If they couldn't accept my children, if they couldn't love them the way they deserved to be loved, then I was done. I held Lucas close, letting his laughter fill the air as Emma and Liam joined us on the couch. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. My kids would always know that they were enough, that they were loved. And no one, not even my parents, would ever make them feel otherwise. The thought of Thanksgiving still hung in the air, but it no longer mattered. My family, the one I had built with Liam and our kids, was all that mattered now. We were together, and that was enough. The days following that phone call dragged on, each one heavier than the last. The idea of Thanksgiving, what was supposed to be a time for family, warmth, and togetherness, now felt like a cruel reminder of how far apart we had drifted. I tried to focus on the small moments with Emma and Lucas, reminding myself that I was doing the right thing. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I could feel it. The tension wasn't just between me and my parents. It was something bigger, something that had been festering for years. By the time I saw my mom's number light up on my phone again, I was ready. I didn't know what she was going to say, but I was done waiting for an apology, for some recognition of the hurt she'd caused. No more second-guessing myself. No more hoping that somehow things would magically get better. "Hello." My voice was steady, but beneath it, I could feel the tremor of everything I had been holding back. "Ally," my mom began, her voice far too calm for my liking. "I just wanted to check in. I know you're upset, but I really hope you'll reconsider. We would love to have you and Liam here for Thanksgiving. Not you and the kids, just you and Liam." I felt the knot in my stomach tighten again, the familiar sting of betrayal flaring up like a wound that wouldn't heal. Her words were so casual, as if she was talking about an insignificant change in plans. But to me, this wasn't about a dinner. This was about everything. The way she had always put Daniel's children first. The way she had dismissed mine as a bother, something to be dealt with instead of cherished. "I meant what I said, Mom," I replied, my voice sharp now. "If my kids aren't welcome, neither am I." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a heavy silence that felt like an eternity. I could hear her breathing, as though she was trying to process what I had just said. But it was clear from the way she sighed, with that exhausted, almost exasperated tone, that she wasn't ready to admit she had done anything wrong. "I just don't understand why you're being so stubborn, Ally," she said, her voice growing frustrated. It's just one night. Why can't you just let it go? Let it go, I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. You're asking me to let it go, Mom? After everything? After years of watching Daniel's kids get special treatment, while mine get left behind. This isn't just about Thanksgiving. It's about the way you've treated them all along. I could hear her shift in her chair on the other end, the discomfort in her silence speaking louder than any words she could have said. But she wasn't going to back down. That much was clear. Ally, we love your kids, she said, her voice softer now, but with a sense of finality that made my skin crawl. It's just that they're more energetic. And it's going to be a quieter dinner this year. I think it's just what's best for everyone. Her excuse was as hollow as it sounded. The more she spoke, the more I felt my anger rising, bubbling up in my chest, threatening to spill over. I clenched my fists, trying to hold onto the last shred of control I had. But I could no longer hold back the words that had been suffocating inside me. Are you really saying that my kids aren't well behaved enough to be with the family? My voice was tight, each word laced with hurt. Emma is 7, and Lucas is 4. Of course, they have energy, but they are children, Mom. And they love you. Don't you see how much this hurts? Ally, I just want a peaceful evening. My mom's voice was cold now, distant, as though the conversation was over, as though I should just accept it. It's not personal, she added, her tone clipped, her words dismissive. I almost laughed, the bitterness choking the sound. Not personal. How could this not be personal? This wasn't just about one dinner. It was about how she had treated my children like an inconvenience, something to tolerate, not love. It was about how they had always been an afterthought while Daniel's children were put on a pedestal. The holidays, the birthday gifts, the praise. They were always so easy for them, always so effortless, while Emma and Lucas were left to figure out where they stood in a family that barely seemed to care. You've made it clear where we stand, Mom, I said, my voice steady now, a quiet anger simmering beneath the surface. I won't bother you again. There was a long silence after that, a silence so thick that it almost felt suffocating. And then, with one last exasperated breath, my mom spoke, her words cold and final. Suit yourself, she said, and then the line went dead. I stood there, my phone pressed to my ear, the silence in the room overwhelming. The anger was still there, sharp and raw, but now there was something else. A sense of finality. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving. This was about years of neglect, of my children being treated as lesser, of me being treated as second best. I had spent so long trying to make things work, trying to earn their love, their approval. But now I was done. I set the phone down on the counter, my hands still shaking. I could hear Emma and Lucas in the other room, still laughing, still oblivious to the weight of what had just happened. They were my priority now. They were my family. And if my parents couldn't see that, if they couldn't see how much they meant to me, then I was done trying to make them understand. And as the reality of what I had just said to my mom settled in, I realized something. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was about everything. It was about standing up for my children, standing up for myself, and most importantly, standing up for the family I had chosen, the one that mattered the most. No more pretending. No more sacrifices for people who couldn't even treat my children with the respect they deserved. If they couldn't accept that, then so be it. I wasn't going to fight for a place at their table anymore. I had my own table now, and I was finally ready to sit at it. The phone call had ended, but the weight of the conversation lingered like a storm cloud in the back of my mind. I stood there in the kitchen, still trying to process everything. The anger had started to fade, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. Emptiness, maybe, or maybe just relief. For the first time, I wasn't holding my breath, hoping my parents would change, would see me and my children as worthy of their love and respect. I was done waiting for that. And yet, as the silence stretched on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, something that used to be so familiar, so comforting. Then I heard it. Laughter. Sweet, innocent, and full of life. The sound of Emma and Lucas, as they continued building their pillow fort in the living room, their little voices full of excitement as they argued over which blanket should go where. I could hear them as clearly as if they were standing right next to me, their joy filling the space in a way nothing else ever had. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting their laughter wash over me like a balm for the soul. In the midst of everything that had just happened, I realized something so simple, yet so profound. I didn't need my parents' approval. I didn't need to prove myself to them anymore. What mattered now was that my children knew they were loved. They knew they mattered. And that was enough. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room, where Emma and Lucas were still giggling as they piled more cushions into their fort. They looked up at me, their faces glowing with happiness, their eyes wide with anticipation. It hit me then, the way their little faces lit up whenever I walked into the room, the way they trusted me with everything they had. They didn't care about Thanksgiving dinners or what my parents thought. All they cared about was the love we shared in our little world. And in that moment, I realized that was more than enough. I forced a smile, trying to push back the knot that had formed in my throat. "All right, you two," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Who's ready for movie night?" Lucas bounced up immediately, his eyes sparkling. "Can we watch the one with the talking dog?" I picked him up and kissed his soft curls, feeling the warmth of his little body against mine. "Of course we can, buddy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. As I settled on the couch with him in my arms and Emma cuddled up beside me, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. This was the family I had built. This was the family I would protect with every ounce of my being. No one else's approval mattered anymore. Not my parents, not anyone else's. The sound of the movie playing in the background, mixed with Emma and Lucas's soft laughter, felt like the most beautiful music I had ever heard. I leaned back into the couch, letting the peacefulness of the moment seep into my bones. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. I felt like I belonged. This was what I had been searching for all along. Not the approval of people who couldn't even accept my children for who they were, but the unconditional love of the family I had chosen. Liam, Emma, and Lucas. That was everything. That was all I needed. I glanced over at Liam, who had joined us on the couch, his arm around my shoulders, his smile warm and steady. He gave me a look, one that said everything without a single word. I smiled back at him, and for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe this was the start of something new. A new chapter in our lives. One where we didn't have to fight for anyone's love. One where we could just be. The tension that had been gnawing at me for so long seemed to dissolve in that moment. It wasn't just the absence of my parents at the table that mattered. It was the presence of the people who truly mattered. I had spent years hoping for a place at their table, begging for their acceptance. But what I hadn't realized was that I had already built a table of my own. A table where love wasn't earned or measured by behavior, but by the simple act of being together. A table where Emma and Lucas were welcome, no matter how energetic or loud they got. A table that was big enough for all of us, with room to grow. I pulled Emma and Lucas closer to me, feeling their warmth, their love. This was the family I had always dreamed of. The one I had always wanted, and now I had it. And nothing could take that away. I had learned something that night. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to be with. And sometimes you have to walk away from the ones who hurt you to find the people who will love you the way you deserve to be loved. And I had found them, right here, in my own home. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly free. No more trying to please anyone. No more feeling like I had to prove my worth. I was enough. My kids were enough. And that was all that mattered. And as I looked down at Emma and Lucas, their faces illuminated by the glow of the TV screen, I knew that this was just the beginning. Our family, in all its messy, beautiful chaos, was exactly where it needed to be. And it would always be enough. The days stretched on after the decision was made, each one carrying its own weight. But the peace I had found with Liam and the kids was something I could never have anticipated. We moved on with our lives, unburdened by the tension that had once hung over every family gathering. The mornings were filled with the soft sounds of Emma and Lucas arguing over who would sit where at the breakfast table, their laughter filling the air like music. Liam and I found small moments of joy in the chaos that was our life. And yet, in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't until a week after Thanksgiving that I received the first message from Daniel. At first, I didn't even recognize the number on my phone screen. It was early morning, the house still quiet except for the hum of the coffee machine. But when I saw his name, I couldn't help the sinking feeling that washed over me. I hadn't expected to hear from him so soon, but the message he sent only confirmed what I already knew. Things weren't going to be as simple as just walking away. Mom and Dad are really upset that you're ignoring them. Are you seriously going to let this go this far? The words were like a slap to the face, as if somehow I was the one who was wrong. I took a deep breath, reading the message again. The cold frustration bubbled up inside me once more, but I refused to let it control me. I had already made my decision. I had already seen the truth of the situation for what it was. Daniel's words didn't change anything. Still, I found myself typing out a response, my fingers trembling slightly as I spoke from the heart. Oh, so Mom never told you that she uninvited my kids, but invited yours? The reply was instant, as if he had been waiting for me to crack. She just wants a calm dinner, ally. You know how your kids can be a lot. I could almost hear the dismissive tone in his words, as if Emma and Lucas were somehow the problem, as if they were the source of the conflict. It was always easier to blame someone else, wasn't it? I could feel my heart racing, my breath catching in my throat. I knew exactly what was happening. Daniel was always the golden child. He had always been the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. And now, here he was again trying to defend them, defend their treatment of my children like they didn't matter. The anger surged through me again, sharper than before. How dare he? I thought. How dare he justify their behavior, their blatant disregard for my children's feelings? I took a deep breath before typing my response, careful not to let the fury I felt seep into my words. A lot? They're children, Daniel. They're not a lot. They're full of life and love, and you know that. But sure, let's pretend I'm the unreasonable one. The words burned as I hit send, but there was something cathartic about finally letting it all out. There was no reply from him for a while, but I wasn't holding my breath. I wasn't expecting him to understand. In fact, I had long ago accepted that he would never get it. Our lives were so different now, so far apart, and no amount of explanation would change that. He was still the favored one, the one who always got the benefit of the doubt. And I was just the difficult one. The one who had to fight for my place in a family that had already made up its mind about me. The silence continued for a few more days, and I allowed myself to relax. I focused on what mattered. The laughter of my children. The warmth of Liam's hand in mine. I let the noise of the world fade into the background, knowing that I was exactly where I needed to be. But then, 3 days after Thanksgiving, it happened. The phone rang again. My heart skipped a beat when I saw my mom's name on the screen. It wasn't the first time she had called since our argument, but each time, my heart still raced, hoping it would be different. Maybe this time she would see the light. Maybe she would realize that I wasn't asking for much. I just wanted my children to be treated fairly. But when I answered the call, it was clear that things had not changed. Ally? My mom began, her voice softer this time, almost pleading. I just wanted to check in. I know you're upset, but I really hope you'll reconsider. We would love to have you and Liam here. Not you and the kids, just you and Liam. The words felt like a punch in the stomach. I had already said my piece. I had already made my decision. But hearing her say it again, so casually, like it was nothing, made something inside me snap. I had heard this before. It wasn't the first time she had excluded my kids. But this time I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I meant what I said, Mom, I replied, my voice hard now, the calm that had previously settled in me dissipating. If my kids aren't welcome, then neither am I. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, as if she was weighing what to say next. Ally, she finally sighed. her tone full of frustration. "I just don't understand why you're making this so difficult. It's just one dinner." The words hung in the air, and I felt my chest tighten. "It's just one dinner," she said. But it wasn't. It was never just one dinner. It was everything that had come before it, and everything that would come after. It was the years of watching my children being overlooked, of feeling like I had to fight for their place at the table. No, it wasn't just one dinner, and I wasn't going to let her minimize it anymore. "You've made your choice, Mom," I said, my voice finally firm. "And I've made mine. I'm not coming. I'm not going to pretend like everything is fine when it's not. I'm done." The silence that followed felt heavy. I could feel the tension crackling through the phone line, but this time I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of losing her approval anymore. I wasn't afraid of losing their love, not when I had found my own family. One that truly loved me and my children, one that accepted us without conditions. "Suit yourself," my mom finally said, her voice colder than before. And then, just like that, she hung up. I stood there, holding the phone in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. But there was no fear, no sadness, just a quiet, unwavering certainty that I had made the right choice. This was the end of the silent treatment, the end of trying to please them, and the beginning of something new, something better. I wasn't going to let their refusal to accept my children tear me apart anymore. I wasn't going to let their silence define me. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The days following that phone call were eerily quiet. My mom didn't try to call again, and Daniel had stopped texting. It felt like they were hoping I would cave, that I would come crawling back to them, begging for forgiveness, desperate for their approval. But I wasn't going to do that. Not this time. I had made my choice. My children and Liam were enough. They had always been enough. And I wasn't about to let anyone, not even my own parents, make me feel like I wasn't deserving of peace. But just as I was starting to breathe easier, to truly embrace the quiet, I received a letter. It came on a Wednesday afternoon, just a few days before Christmas. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and addressed in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. I held it for a moment, staring at the familiar name, my heart pounding in my chest. I already knew what was inside, nothing good. But I tore open the envelope anyway, my hands trembling as I unfolded the letter. At first, the words didn't make sense. I read them again, then again, each time trying to make sense of what they were demanding. But the more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It wasn't an apology. No, this was something worse. The letter demanded money, a sum that, at first glance, seemed almost laughable. They were asking for reimbursement, for all the emotional and financial support they had supposedly given me over the years. There was even a list, an itemized breakdown of expenses, as if they were billing me for every moment of my childhood, every gift, every meal, every time they helped me in some way. The total? $78,542. I let out a disbelieving laugh, the kind that was both bitter and incredulous. Was this some kind of joke? How could they possibly think this was okay? How could they think they were entitled to anything after everything they had put me through? I skimmed through the letter, each word feeling more ridiculous than the last. They had the audacity to claim that I owed them for raising me, for sacrificing for my well-being. And at the bottom of the page was the final insult, the total amount they were demanding I pay them. The same people who had treated my children as an inconvenience, the same people who had turned their backs on me when I needed them most. My hands shook with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I reread the letter one more time, but the more I looked at it, the more absurd it became. They were trying to guilt me, manipulate me into believing that I owed them something for my own childhood. As if I should be grateful for everything they had done, as if I should be thanking them for the years of favoritism, the constant comparisons, the unspoken but ever-present message that my children would never be good enough in their eyes. I could feel the fury rising again, but this time, it was different. This time I wasn't just angry. I was disgusted. Disgusted by their greed, by their entitlement, and disgusted by the realization that they thought they could buy my love, by my loyalty, like they had done with Daniel all these years. I I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and then I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me any longer. They had crossed a line. And this time, I wasn't going to back down. The next morning, I called Liam into the living room, holding the letter in my hand. He read through it quickly, his face tightening as he processed what they were asking. "This is insane," he said, his voice low, filled with disbelief. "They think they can do this?" I nodded, my heart still racing, the anger simmering beneath my calm exterior. "They're trying to force me into a corner, trying to make me feel guilty for walking away. But I'm not going to let them. I'm done." Liam placed his hand on mine, his grip firm and comforting. "We'll handle this together," he said, his voice steady. "You don't have to face this alone." I smiled faintly, grateful for his support. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to carry the weight of my family's expectations on my shoulders. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up for my kids, for Liam, for the family we had built. And I wasn't going to let my parents tear that down, no matter what they tried. That afternoon, I sent a letter of my own, one that was simple but final. I wouldn't give them a cent, not a penny. I wasn't going to play their game. I wasn't going to let them use me, manipulate me, or make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. "Dear Mom and Dad," I wrote, "I have received your letter and I have made my decision. I will not be sending you any money. Your demands are not only unreasonable, but they are also insulting. You have made your feelings about me and my children clear, and I am choosing to live my life on my own terms. I will no longer tolerate manipulation, guilt-tripping, or any attempts to control me. I have made my peace, and I am moving forward with my family. I will not be a part of your games any longer. Sincerely, Ally." I sealed the envelope with a sense of finality, my hand steady as I placed the letter in the mailbox. It was done. There was no turning back now. And just as I had expected, my parents didn't take it well. The silence stretched on for a few more days before the phone call came. My mom's voice was thick with anger, barely controlled. "How could you do this to us, Ally? After everything we've done for you?" I didn't flinch. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't apologize. "I'm not doing this anymore, Mom. You crossed a line. And now I'm done." There was a long silence on the other end, and then the unmistakable sound of her hanging up. And just like that, the legal threats, the manipulation, and the toxic expectations came to an end. For the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. I was free. The rest of the day passed in a blur, but one thing was clear to me. I had made the right choice. And no matter what they tried to throw at me, I wasn't going to let them break me. Days passed in a strange sort of peace, but it was a quiet peace, one that felt like the calm before the storm. After sending my letter, after standing firm in my decision to cut ties, I thought I could finally breathe, that I could finally let go of the years of tension and manipulation. But of course, I should have known better. My parents weren't the type to simply walk away. And the silence between us, the one I had come to relish, was only the calm before the storm I had been dreading. It started with a knock on the door. A knock I had not been expecting, but one that I knew, deep down, would eventually come. When I saw my parents standing there, I felt a strange mixture of anger, sadness, and, dare I admit it, fear. I was ready for them to try and twist my decision into something it wasn't. I was ready for them to use guilt and manipulation, just like they always had. But this time it would be different. I wouldn't let them have the power over me anymore. I opened the door slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. My mother's face was twisted into a forced smile, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. My father stood behind her, his posture stiff, his jaw set in that familiar way I had come to associate with his disappointment. They were here. They were here to try and make me feel guilty, to try and make me question my decision. But I was done with all of that. "Ally," my mom said, her voice strained, though she still tried to keep it light. "Merry Christmas. We just wanted to talk." I didn't invite them in. I didn't even step aside. Instead, I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed tightly across my chest, my eyes meeting theirs. I wasn't going to let them push me around anymore. Not this time. What do you want, Mom? I asked, my voice steady but cold. She glanced at my father, and for a moment, I thought they might leave. But then she spoke again, her words sharp and desperate. We're not here to fight, ally. We just want to make things right. We know you're upset, and we're sorry. But you have to understand we've done so much for you, for your kids. You owe us. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of her mouth. I had just read their letter, had seen the way they tried to turn everything into a transaction, as if love could be measured in dollars and sacrifices. I thought I could handle it, but hearing it spoken aloud, hearing her try to justify their behavior, made something snap inside me. You don't get it? I said, my voice finally breaking the calm facade I had been holding on to. It's not about money, Mom. It's not about what you've done for me. It's about what you've taken from me, from my kids. For years, I've had to watch as Daniel's children were put on a pedestal, as mine were treated like an afterthought. And now you're asking me to just forget it? To pretend that everything is fine? Her smile faltered, and my father took a step forward, his face hardening. Ally, we didn't do anything wrong. You're overreacting, he said, his voice low and condescending. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm not overreacting. You've always treated me and my children like we were less than, like we didn't matter. And now you're demanding money like you've been some kind of saviors in my life. That's not love, Mom. That's control. I could see her face redden, a mix of anger and shame flashing across her features. We raised you, she said, her voice trembling now. We gave you everything, and now you turn your back on us? You're willing to throw everything away over this? Over one stupid dinner? I felt a laugh bubble up from deep inside me, a laugh that was more out of disbelief than anything else. It's not just one dinner, Mom, I said, my voice quiet but filled with conviction. It's the years of favoritism, the way you always made me feel like I wasn't enough. The way you treated my kids like they didn't deserve a place at your table. And now you're trying to make me feel like I'm the one who's wrong. My father took another step forward, his anger now evident in the tightness of his jaw and the way his fists were clenched at his sides. You're being selfish, ally. You think you're the only one who's been hurt here? You think we don't deserve something in return for all we've done for you? I took a step back, finally breaking the tension in the air. I turned my back to them, walking into the living room where Liam was, where Emma and Lucas were playing. They didn't see me as I passed through the doorway, their laughter and innocence filling the space, but I knew they could feel the tension in the room. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, before turning back to face my parents. I'm not going to keep doing this, I said, my voice low but unwavering. I'm not going to keep pretending that you can treat me and my kids however you want, and I'll just sit back and accept it. I've had enough. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't going to let that sway me. I wasn't going to let her guilt me into backing down again. This was bigger than Thanksgiving. This was about my family, my children, and what we deserved. We deserved to be loved without conditions. We deserved respect. And if that meant standing up to my parents, if that meant walking away, then so be it. You've made your choice, Mom, I said quietly, and I've made mine. I won't be part of this anymore. I'm done. There was a long, painful silence between us. My parents didn't say anything else. They didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't try to explain. They just stood there, frozen in place, the weight of their choices finally sinking in. Without another word, I walked out of the room, heading back to where Liam and the kids were. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I sat down beside Liam, as I watched Emma and Lucas continue to play without a care in the world, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from their expectations. Free from their manipulations. Free to love and protect my own family without guilt, without apology. And I knew with absolute certainty that this was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I finally stood up for myself, for my children, and for the family we had built. No one could take that away from me. Not anymore. The days between Christmas and New Year's felt like a slow exhale. There was a strange sense of calm in the house, an eerie quiet that seemed to settle in after the storm. My parents hadn't tried to reach out again, and I didn't hear from Daniel. For once, it felt like the weight that had been pressing down on me for years had lifted. But, as always, I knew it wasn't over. It never was. And just as I had feared, New Year's Eve arrived with an unexpected knock at the door. I was in the middle of preparing our dinner, the smell of roasted vegetables and garlic filling the house as Emma and Lucas ran around, too excited to sleep, their small voices giggling in the background. Liam was busy setting the table, and everything felt so perfectly normal, so perfectly us. We were together, and for the first time in a long time I could breathe freely. No more pretending. No more feeling like I had to fit into someone else's mold. I was finally myself. But the peace didn't last. The knock was quiet at first, just a soft rap on the door that barely registered in my mind. But when it came again, this time more insistent, I froze. My heart skipped a beat, and the familiar knot of tension rose in my chest. I already knew who it was. I didn't need to check the peephole. Liam, can you? I started, but my voice trailed off as I glanced at him. He could see the uncertainty in my eyes, the hesitation that I hadn't felt in weeks. He nodded, silently moving toward the door. When he opened it, there they were. My parents, standing on the doorstep like they hadn't just tried to tear my life apart. Like they hadn't crossed every line imaginable to make me feel like I was the one in the wrong. Behind them, Daniel stood with his arms crossed, his face a mix of frustration and something I couldn't quite place. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do, how to react. My mom was the first to speak. "Ally," she said, her voice soft but strained, like she was trying to control the anger simmering beneath her words. "We've been talking, and we know this has gone too far. We're just trying to do the right thing." The right thing? The words rang hollow, like they meant nothing at all. After everything that had happened, after the letter, the manipulation, the exclusion of my kids, now they were talking about the right thing? My heart clenched in my chest. "I don't want to fight anymore, Ally," my mom continued, her voice cracking. "We've made mistakes. We've been wrong. But please come back. We need to fix this. It's not too late." I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, the desperation in her voice, but none of it moved me. Not anymore. The years of favoritism, of letting my children feel less than, had done enough damage. I had made my choice. "We're sorry," my father added, his voice thick with something I couldn't quite read. "We just want to be a family again." I felt Liam step beside me, his hand on my shoulder, grounding me. I didn't need to look at him to know he was standing strong by my side. It was a silent reassurance that I wasn't alone, that I didn't have to carry this weight anymore. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how much they begged, no matter how many apologies they offered, it didn't change what they had done. It didn't change the way they had made me feel for so long. I shook my head slowly, my heart heavy but my resolve stronger than ever. "You don't get it, Mom," I said, my voice steady, though a deep sadness lingered beneath the surface. "This isn't about you and me. This is about my kids. This is about the way you've treated them, the way you've treated me for years. And I'm not going to pretend anymore that it's okay." My mom's face twisted in confusion, and my father's jaw tightened, but I didn't flinch. "You don't just get to come back and erase all the hurt, all the damage that's been done. You don't get to waltz in here and expect me to accept things as they were. I can't do that." For a moment, there was only silence. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, louder than any words ever could. I could see the hurt in their eyes, the realization that things had truly changed. But for once, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sorry for them. The guilt had been a weight around my neck for years, but now it was gone. And I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their toxic cycle. "You've made your choice," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. "And I've made mine. I've built my own family. One that loves each other. One that doesn't need to be bought, manipulated, or guilted into being together." I turned away from them, but before I could walk back into the living room, my mom called out to me, her voice strained. "You'll regret this, Ally. You'll see. One day, you'll realize that we were just trying to help you." I didn't turn back. Couldn't. I couldn't let them keep using guilt as a weapon, couldn't let them keep making me feel like I was the problem. The door clicked shut behind me, and in that instant, something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt free. I walked back into the living room, where Emma and Lucas were still laughing, still wrapped up in their little world of joy. They didn't know what had just happened, didn't know the extent of the battle I had just fought. But that was okay. They didn't need to know. All they needed to know was that I would always be there for them. I would always fight for them, no matter what. Liam took my hand, his fingers gently wrapping around mine, and I finally let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. We were okay. We were more than okay. We had each other, and that was enough. As the evening wore on, the house filled with the warmth of our celebration, the love we had for one another flowing through every corner of the room. We didn't need my parents. We didn't need anyone else's approval. We were a family, and that was all that mattered. And as the clock ticked closer to midnight, marking the end of one year and the beginning of another, I knew that this was the moment of true resolution. The moment I had taken control of my life. The moment I had found peace. The moment I realized that sometimes, letting go of the people who don't deserve you is the best thing you can do. Happy New Year. A new chapter had begun, and this time, I was the one writing it. The weeks that followed New Year's Eve passed in a haze of quiet joy. The world outside seemed to move on, but inside our home, everything felt new, fresh, like the air had cleared, and I could finally breathe again without the weight of the past hanging over me. Emma and Lucas continued to grow, their laughter more vibrant than ever, filling every room with a kind of joy I had almost forgotten existed. And Liam, my rock, my partner, remained by my side, always steady, always loving. Together, we had built something that was ours, something that could never be taken away. Looking back, it was hard to pinpoint the exact moment I had realized just how much power I had given away to my parents over the years. It had been a slow erosion, a quiet surrender, until one day, I woke up and realized I had been living my life in a shadow, constantly measuring myself, my worth, by their standards. And once I saw that, once I understood that I had been living in a way that wasn't truly mine, I couldn't unsee it. It wasn't an easy realization. It wasn't something that happened overnight. But once it clicked, everything started to make sense. The constant tension, the guilt, the need to be enough for them. And for what? For their approval? For a seat at their table that was never truly mine to begin with? No, I wasn't going to let that define me anymore. I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future. The family I had created with Liam and the children I adored, that was my legacy. That was what mattered. I didn't need anyone's permission to love them. I didn't need to ask for validation. I didn't need to chase anyone's affection. I had my own. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing in my own skin, unapologetically me. The woman who had fought for her children. The woman who had walked away from toxic ties and chose to put her family first. The woman who realized that her worth was not tied to anyone else's perception of her. And as the days went on, the more I realized that this was the beginning of something beautiful, something powerful. This wasn't just about leaving my parents behind. It was about stepping into my own light, fully and unapologetically. It was about creating a life that was free from guilt, free from manipulation, free from the need to be perfect in the eyes of people who had never truly seen me for who I was. I looked at my children, their faces full of innocence, full of hope, and I knew I had made the right decision. They would never know the heartache I had endured. They would never have to question their worth or their place in the world. They would know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were loved not because they had earned it, but because they simply were. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could give them. The weight of the years of my parents' expectations was gone now. I didn't need to carry it anymore. I had finally let go. And with that release came freedom. Freedom to love without conditions. Freedom to create the life I wanted, not the life I thought I should want. As I sat on the porch watching Emma and Lucas run around in the yard, their laughter echoing through the crisp air, I couldn't help but smile. The world was wide open before us. The future was ours to create, And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly in control of my own destiny. Liam sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into him, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "We did it," I whispered, almost to myself. "We really did it." He kissed the top of my head, his voice soft but full of certainty. "We did it, ally. Together." And in that moment, surrounded by the people I loved, I knew that nothing else mattered. The past was behind us. The future was ours. And as long as we had each other, there was nothing we couldn't face. This was just the beginning of a life lived on our own terms, the beginning of a family built on love, trust, and respect, the beginning of a new chapter where we were no longer bound by the chains of the past, but free to move forward with open hearts. A new beginning, and this time it was ours. As the days drifted into weeks, the change within me deepened, settling into my bones like a long-awaited peace. We found our rhythm, our new normal. There were no more whispers of judgment, no more second-guessing the love we shared as a family. Every laugh, every small moment with Emma and Lucas became a quiet declaration of how far we had come. It was like living in full color after years of dullness. I could see them now, truly see them. Their eyes shining with innocence, their smiles wide and free. They weren't tainted by the burden of unmet expectations anymore. They were just kids, playing in a world where they were loved simply for being who they were. The new year brought with it a sense of growth, not just in our family but in me. I had never felt more sure of myself, more grounded in the decisions I had made. The weight of my past, of the years spent seeking validation from people who could never truly see me, no longer had any hold on me. It wasn't that I had stopped caring about my parents entirely. It was that I had learned to care about myself and my family more. The boundaries I had set were not walls keeping people out. They were shields protecting the things I held dear, the things that mattered most. I had learned something so important along the way. That sometimes the people you've always called family aren't the ones who will fight for you, love you, or respect you in the way you deserve. And that's okay. Because family, as I had come to understand it, isn't about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, who show up for you, who love you unconditionally, without needing anything in return. And that was Liam. That was Emma and Lucas. That was the family I had built, not on obligation, but on love, trust, and choice. And in those quiet moments, when we sat together at the dinner table, or curled up on the couch for movie nights, I felt the fullness of what we had built. The tension from the past was gone, replaced by a gentle peace that wrapped around us like a blanket. We were enough, and we always had been. It wasn't about seeking approval anymore. It was about living for ourselves and the people who truly mattered to us. I took a long breath one evening as I watched the kids run through the yard, their laughter echoing under the soft glow of the setting sun. The world felt endless, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The future stretched out before me, wide and open, full of possibilities. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that we could handle anything. We would face it all together. There would be challenges ahead, of course. Life wasn't perfect, but with Liam beside me, with my children's love filling the spaces between us, I knew we had the strength to weather anything. We had already proven that. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold and pink, I realized that this moment was everything I had ever wanted. The life I had fought for, the life I had created. And it was more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined. This was our new beginning. And as I sat there, surrounded by the love of my life and my children, I couldn't help but think, if this was what we had now, I could never ask for more. This was enough. We were enough. And the best was yet to come. As I sat there, watching the kids run through the yard, their laughter ringing through the air, I realized that everything had led to this moment. The choices I had made, the battles fought, the tears shed, they had all brought me to a place where I could finally say with certainty, I was home, surrounded by the love of my children, by the unwavering support of Liam. I had found the peace I had been searching for all these years. Life may not always be easy, but in this moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the strength to face them. And more importantly, I knew that the family I had built was invincible. We were enough. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. Before I sign off, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to make a hard decision for your family's sake? Or walked away from something or someone that no longer served you? Drop a comment below and share your story. I'd love to connect with all of you. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt the power of standing up for yourself and the ones you love, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Join our community of people who are choosing to live their best, most authentic lives, no matter what. The journey doesn't stop here, we've only just begun. See you in the next video.